thousands of federal workers have received layoff notices, basically telling them their job is no longer there, which is life-changing. And then an email comes in and says, wait a minute, we take it back. We're rescinding the notice. But the future is still unclear. What should you do in this situation, and why is it happening? The Trump administration is shrinking the federal workforce by any means necessary. This has led to mass layoffs. By a recent count, it was something like 58,000 people have been laid off. Now, if you include the force outs, the incentives, the early retirement, the buyouts, the deferred resignation program, the number is way over 100,000. But if you're just looking at reduction in force, layoff notices, it's around 58,000. There's a good possibility that you or someone you know this year could receive their RIF notice. But some of these layoffs are being rescinded. They're being pulled back and canceled for two main reasons. One is there were errors in the RIF notice. Two is legal challenges. Now, there's also a third one. They could actually want to retain you for other reasons. Let's look at an agency that was recently impacted by this, Voice of America. Last month, over 600 VOA employees got layoff notices, which was part of an 85% workforce cut. That left like 250 people in VOA and their parent agency. But then a week later, on June 27th, they rescinded those layoff notices because of errors in documents. We're talking about errors like wrong years of service, wrong competitive level, or veteran status. Those mistakes violated union contracts, so they had to hit the pause button. But these are layoffs that will probably still go through. They're not canceled completely, they're just paused. Now, over at the Department of Health and Human Services, HHS, 328 employees were reinstated after a 90% workforce cut. Also, about 2,500 probationary workers were reinstated. Now, those reinstatements at the HHS, those look more permanent, but they're still messy. So when somebody gets a RIF notice, what does that even mean, right? It could mean several things. One, the layoff is delayed, not canceled. Legal or contract violations were found. The agency made a mistake and they want to keep you, or your retention standing might be recalculated. This means now you're working with even more uncertainty. Even if your agency wants to retain you, the trust has been somewhat eroded. Maybe you don't want to work there anymore. Now, a certain percentage of the population will gladly take their job back, but there's other people that have moved on. So let's say you get a RIF notice. What should you do? Well, the first thing is ask for written clarification on your status. Request a copy of your RIF retention register placement, verify your EOPF, and meet with HR or the union rep. The reason we're seeing a lot of these layoffs being undone is either for legal or administrative reasoning. Actually, it's both of those, right? Because the OPM has a handbook over 100 pages. You're supposed to follow it. There's specific rules on when you're doing a reduction in force. So agencies, they need to give 60-day notice, although there is a new waiver for 30 days. Then they should calculate retention based on seniority and also performance. So the way that we've been seeing it recently is more chaotic, more done in a faster way. And that's why there's all of these legal challenges when it comes to the massive RIFs. Now, it's important that you follow it the right way, step by step, because if you don't do it that way, you're looking at back pay. The agency could have to provide back pay to their people. We've also seen reinstatements happen because of public pressure. If you look at the coal mining community, we're looking at West Virginia, right? The coal miners, 20% of them that have worked over 20 years in the industry, they have black lung. Black lung is a big deal. So with the HHS cuts, what essentially was going to occur is they were going to remove the X-ray, the mobile X-ray machines for your chest to detect black lung. And less examinations were going to be conducted. That puts that population at a higher risk. The public, they were enraged by this, and due to the backlash, they reinstated the workers that were focused on coal mining research. But the majority of the time, what we're seeing is the agency doesn't really want to keep you. The agency wants to cut their workforce numbers down to send a signal to the Trump administration that they're on the same page. They're in the same playbook of reducing the total size of the federal workforce. Take a lady over at the SSA. She received a RIF notice. At the same time, she was attending hiring events. Her union sponsored a hiring event, and she went there, ended up getting an interview with a contracting company. Now she works as a contractor. So in the DC area, we've seen this time and time again. Even before this year, you see people go from contracting to a federal worker and then vice versa, from a federal worker to a contractor. Now, what I've seen more often than not is I've seen contractors trying to become federal workers. And it's for one reason, really, is for the benefits. It's to have a secure pension. But what's right for you, let's say you're in the DC area, what is the right path for you? It depends on what stage in life you're currently in. Are you in the stage where stability and benefits matter more? Or are you in a stage where you need a higher paycheck each and every pay period? So that's something you have to ask yourself. And also right now, the contractors are not faring any better. There's been reports that come out where you see thousands of contracting jobs in jeopardy or being cut because of what DOJ is doing with their contract reviews. Now, in some cases, they're cutting contracts that are wasteful. In other cases, they're cutting contracts and realizing that they've made a mistake. Okay, let's take a look at some of the agencies that have been doing the most rescinding. We have the Agency for Global Media, 639 layoffs rescinded. HHS with 538 layoffs rescinded. Department of Education, RIFs for 50% rescinded by injunction. And then we got the National Nuclear Security Administration with 300 staff that have been reinstated. There are also other agencies, like take NASA, for example. They have rescinded layoff notices, but we don't have the exact numbers for that agency. Now, in a lot of these situations, what happened is the agency, they pushed their people onto paid administrative leave. So this puts them in a gray area. And the reason why the agency did that is because they don't want them in the office, but they're still waiting for a verdict to come out of the Supreme Court to see what they can do with the reduction in force. So in the meanwhile, we're paying these individuals to stay in the gray area. And in some situations, that means these people cannot go and apply for another job. They cannot interview for another job, depending on what agency they're working in. If it's Department of Defense and they're trying to get a job where maybe it conflicts, right? You have a conflict of interest. They're still an active federal employee, so they can't jump at that opportunity. Now, when people do get a RIF notice, it feels like a final decision. But remember, it's part of a process, and that process is not perfect. Mistakes are made. People are put in the wrong group. The wrong performance ratings are used. We've seen individuals that say, hey, I've received 4 out of 4, and when the agency gives me the RIF notice, what they're telling me is I had a 3 out of 3, and that's clearly not the case. This is why it's also important to have all your support and documentations ready to go so that you can challenge a decision like that. Another big factor is something called your service computation date, or SCD. Now, there's a few different categories of SCD. First, you have your SCDE, which is employment. E stands for employment, and that basically means when you entered the government. The next thing you have is your SCD for leave purposes. So let's say you served in the military, right? Because you served in the military, your military time, or in some cases, your deployment time, could count towards your leave accrual rate. That means you earn more leave than you would otherwise. Then you have an SCD, that's for the RIF. Now, if you don't have any breaks in services, it should be pretty easy to figure out. Otherwise, you're gonna have to do some simple calculations and find out which service computation date are they using for your RIF. And like we were just talking about, performance ratings are very important as well. You have agencies, specifically the Department of Defense, they prioritize your performance rating. Then you have the Department of Homeland Security. There's some sub-agencies within the DHS. They also prioritize your performance, where other agencies, they do not. But sometimes incorrect or outdated performance evaluations could be in your file, so you want to check that on a periodic basis. If you're a veteran, your layoff rights include something called veterans preference. This means all things being equal, you should have a less probability of getting laid off because you're a veteran. Now, this means different things in different agencies because you have agencies that are heavy veterans, and I'm looking at the U.S. Air Force specifically, and then you have others that are kind of light when it comes to veterans. There's not many veterans there, so that could benefit you more. But agencies oftentimes do not include that veteran preference the appropriate way. You have to understand that there's different preference, right? There's the 30% disabled, there's the +5 military veterans. So you need to make sure that your category is understood. In addition to all of this, we have a major federal agency in the Washington, D.C. area that's being pushed out of D.C. It's going somewhere completely different. This could be seen as good news by some people, and by other people, they're looking at it as bad news. Now, unfortunately, because this agency is moving, they are occupying another agency's footprint. So that kind of displaces another agency. So it's a little bit of a mess. If you're interested to learn more about that, check this video out next. Stay updated by signing up to the free newsletter down below. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.